Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Namba Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Purajikacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Purajikacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. So I'm happy to see that we're practicing nice social distancing this afternoon. And it's all because Glenn set this up too close. And then anyway, so don't worry about it. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 27th day of July 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is. Translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 18, Conclusion, the Perfection of Renunciation. Text number 2 on page 662. Okay. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha. Kamyanam karmanam nyasam sannyasam kabayo viduhu sarva karma palatyagam prahustyagam vichakshanaha. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha. Kamyanam karmanam nyasam sannyasam kavayo viduhu sarva karma palatyagam prahustyagam vichakshanaha. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha. Kamyanam karmanam nyasam sannyasam kavayo viduhu sarva karma palatyagam prahustyagam vichakshanaha. You're first. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam Sanyasam Kavayo Viduhu Sarva Karma Palatyagam Prahustyagam Vichakshana. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam Sanyasam Kavayo Viduhu Sarva Karma Palatyagam Prahustyagam Vichakshana. Ed? Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam Sanyasam Kavayo Viduhu Sarva Karma Palatyagam Prahustyagam Vichakshana. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, said, Kamyanam, with desire, karmanam, of activities, nyasam, renunciation, sannyasam, the renounced order of life, kavayaha, the learned, viduhu, know, sarva, of all, karma, activities, phala, of results, tyagam, renunciation, prahu, call, tyagam, renunciation, vichakshanaha, the experienced. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the giving up of activities that are based on material desire is what great learned men call the renounced order of life, sannyas. And giving up the results of all activities is what the wise call renunciation, or tyaga. Purport. The performance of activities for results has to be given up. This is the instruction of the Bhagavad Gita. But activities leading to advanced spiritual knowledge are not to be given up. This will be made clear in the next verses. In the Vedic literature, there are many prescriptions of methods for performing sacrifice for some particular purpose. There are certain sacrifices to perform to attain a good son or to attain elevation to the higher planets. But sacrifices prompted by desires should be stopped. However, sacrifice for the purification of one's heart or for advancement in the spiritual science should not be given up. Om jnana timarandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshu unmidatam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. Page 663, Suresh, 663. 663. Could you help him? Help him, Alex. So, Arjun's question was, Almighty Armed One, I wish to understand the purpose of renunciation, tyaga, and of the renounced order of life, sannyas, O killer of Keshi demon, master of the senses. So there's an important distinction here Krishna is making. The definition of sannyas, giving up of activities that are based on material desire, is what learned men call renounced order of life. So it's looking within. In other words, what is your motivation when you do something? And at that point, you can determine you can determine it yourself if you're acting on the basis of material desire, personal desire, or you're acting on some other basis. And the other basis is, as Prabhupada makes it clear in the purport, for the purpose of purification or advancement in the spiritual science. They should not be given up. So this is it's more difficult to come to this point of sannyas than to perform tyaga. Tyaga can be done partially, you know. In other words, you can sometimes give up the results and sometimes not, and that's what many people do. You can see how tyaga in this definition is close to charity. I mean, why just give it up? You do something, just throw it away? No. Give it to the Harekrishna temple, you know, and you're giving it up, and at the same time you're making spiritual advancement. So that's transcendental charity. And that's encouraged elsewhere, karma yoga. But in our actual daily life, in our practice of Krishna consciousness, we're aiming more for renunciation in this definition, which is really based on what's called vairagya. This is what vairagya means. Kaminam karmanam nyasam, to give up materially motivated activities. So then the question is, well, what is the basis of your activity then? If the basis isn't you want to enjoy the fruit, then what is the basis? So that's where bhakti comes in, because the basis is purification, and the purification means performing the activities of Krishna consciousness. That's what the chanting is meant to do. That's what the regulation of the your schedule, so you can come to the programs. The 4 regulative principles, which is really tyaga, but the motivation for doing that is for purification. It's not to get some material power. That can also be there for when you perform tapasya. These things are all related. Tapasya it gives you power if you're doing it in an authorized way, an effective way. But what is that power used for? You can perform tapasya like Hiranyakashipu to get some material powers to conquer the universe and kill Vishnu, and incredible austerity before you can't even conceive of what he did, And all the demons that Krishna killed, they're all great yogis. Putana and Dhenukasura and Trunabharta, they're all powerful yogis who were able to acquire this ability to shape change. Imagine becoming a tornado. That's far out. But what for? To do harm to others. So the motivation is the key. Why are you doing what you're doing? And ultimately, what's the gold standard in Krishna consciousness? Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karma janavatamanukule Krishna nushiladam bhaktir uttama. The pure devotional service is defined here in this verse. First, what it isn't, it's devoid of any other desire, defined in 3 categories. Jnana, jnana karma dhyanabatam. So jnana here means desire for liberation. I'm going to cultivate my awareness, and through reading the Vedanta Sutra and contemplating neti. You ever heard the phrase neti? You know what it is. Neti? It's not the thing where you clean your nose. I think the neti. But you know what it means? Not iti. Not this, not this, not this, not this. So it's a negative discipline. Well, what is the supreme? Well, obviously it's not this. This is just ordinary wood. And you go, wherever you look, that's not it. That's not it. That's it. So you end up with pure consciousness. We're not into that. We're into understanding what Krishna is not, but we're much more into understanding what Krishna is. That the supreme absolute truth, the supreme Brahman, is this person, and with limited qualities and pastimes and names and activities, and he's ready to engage you in those activities. It's a whole different mindset. So our motivation for activities should be to become purified, so we can experience these higher levels of devotional service. That's a healthy motivation. Now, in the course of doing that, there are all kinds of things that we do that help to, cut down our false ego and our false pride. All this bowing down, the bowing down is very important. We take it for granted, but, in those early days, nobody wanted to bow down. People didn't want to, but there's a whole little conversation probably with someone. I'm not going to bow down. But yes, you are, You'll bow down at the time of death. Everybody bows down, So rather than be forced to bow down voluntarily. That's the whole idea. You give up the fruits of your activity anyway at a certain point. If you hold on to them for dear life until they're ripped away by death, which is also Krishna, mrityu sarvaharaschaham. This is right in the 10th chapter. For those who deny the existence of God, who live, according to their whims, as we read at the end of the previous chapter. At the end of the 16th chapter, shastra vidamutsraja bhartate kamakarata, who discard and disregard the injunctions of shastra and act according to their own material desires. In other words, what everyone's doing. You may accumulate very much wealth and prestige and so many material things, but it's all temporary. It's ripped away at the time of death, and you go we know not where. So that kind of motivation is self-defeating. You see. So, but Krishna explains how one can live and the qualities one wants to cultivate in order to purify the heart of kama and krodha, anger, and all of the concomitant, and begin to experience one's real self and real relationship with Krishna, with God, at every moment, which is very, the peace is described here, and the happiness, prasannatma, brahma bhuta prasannatma nashochati nakangshati. Just imagine living in a state of mind where there's no lamentation and no hankering. What a wonderful thing that is. There's so much lamentation, so much anxiety, because people's lives have been disrupted by this whole thing. Even if even if you're perfectly healthy, and you have enough money and you're okay, still the anxiety level because of the whole societal thing that's going on. Your whole life can be upended at any moment. So, but if you have your faith and your consciousness and your aspirations situated in the unshakable divine, then the anxiety level is much lower. It's just what material world is. We've been training for this for as many years or as many months as we've been practicing Krishna consciousness. We are spirit. We cannot be cut. We cannot be choked by the coronavirus. So to be able to get to that point of constantly feeling oneself being protected by the Lord, just like Prahlad Maharaj, that's a foundation upon which to build Krishna consciousness. So the perfection of renunciation. It's interesting that the whole chapter is focusing on that. That's the title of it, because especially this idea of vairagya, which goes along with sannyas. As Krishna says earlier in the Bhagavad Gita, sannyas without yoga just brings dukkha, just brings misery. To try to give things up artificially without cultivating the inner sense of renunciation and detachment is just the worst kind of pain. You end up, giving up your sannyas or practicing sannyas externally, but cultivating, kinds of material desires on the side. And that's the worst thing for spiritual life, So Krishna comes right on and says that giving up activities that are based on material desire, that's sannyas. And giving up the results of all activities is renunciation. This is, he's spoken of these things before. We're giving up the results of activities is karma yoga. Is you put the effort into it, and then the fruits, as much as possible, because you have to maintain your body and soul together, but you give over to Krishna for the propagation of Krishna consciousness, and there's no bondage of the fruit. Otherwise, if you're working always for the fruits, and then you're coveting those fruits, you're bound up by that desire that you're cultivating. You see, in other words, this is how you take another birth, and who knows whether it would be higher or lower birth, and we want to. That's our basic motivation. It's okay to want to break free from the bondage of birth and death, but how to do that is being described here in these verses. Okay, let's go on with he's exploring now tyaga in the third verse. Okay. Tyajam dosha vadityeke karma prahu manishinaha yagyadana tapakarma natyajam iti chapare. Some learned men declare that all kinds of fruitive activities should be given up as faulty. Yet other sages maintain that acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance should never be abandoned. Purport. There are many activities in the Vedic literature which are subjects of contention. For instance, it is said that an animal can be killed in a sacrifice, yet some maintain that animal killing is completely abominable. Although animal killing in a sacrifice is recommended in the Vedic literature, the animal is not considered to be killed. The sacrifice is to give a new life to the animal. Sometimes the animal is given a new animal life after being killed in the sacrifice, and sometimes the animal is promoted immediately to the human form of life. But there are different opinions among the sages. Some say that animal killing should always be avoided, and others say that for a specific sacrifice it is good. All these different opinions on sacrificial activity are now being clarified by the Lord himself. So one of the things is that it's described that in this age, you don't have the qualified Brahmins and everything to chant the mantras exactly right, so that the animal will be promoted. In the morning, we're reading about the same thing. This King Prachana Barishad, he was performing all these sacrifices with the motivation of going to heaven, you know. And even he understood that this is not such a good thing, but it's all he knew. So Narada Muni comes and shows him all these angry animals that he killed, mispronounced the mantras or whatever, he did something wrong, and they didn't get a new body, and they're just waiting to get him when he dies and, you know, punish him. And it's this heavy-duty thing. So he's obviously going to be initiated there into practicing bhakti, but not before we hear a wonderful long allegory about the condition of the spirit soul imprisoned in the body. So Krishna is saying there's a difference in opinion about whether, and then this theme will go on, sacrifice, charity, and penance, whether they should be given up and how they should be given up. So we'll read about that. So he says, Nishtayam shunume tatra tyage bharata sattama tyago hi purusha vyagra trivada sampakirtitaha. O best of the Bharatas, now hear my judgment about renunciation. O tiger among men, renunciation is declared in the scriptures to be of three kinds. Okay. Now, renunciation is tyaga here. Tyaga. Purport, although there are differences of opinion about renunciation, here the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, gives his judgment, which should be taken as final. After all, the Vedas are different laws given by the Lord. Here the Lord is personally present, and his word should be taken as final. The Lord says that the process of renunciation should be considered in terms of the modes of material nature in which it is performed. So we're back to dividing things with the modes of nature. We went through that in the last chapter, you remember, in the 17th chapter. Austerity in the modes of goodness, passion, ignorance, etc. Yajna tapakarma natyajam karyameva tat yagyodhanam tapaschaiva pavanani manishinam. Acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance are not to be given up. They must be performed. Indeed, sacrifice, charity, and penance purify even the great souls. Purport. The yogis should perform acts for the advancement of human society. There are many purificatory processes for advancing a human being to spiritual life. The marriage ceremony, for example, is considered to be one of these sacrifices. It is called Vivaha Yajna. Should a sannyasi, who is in the renounced order of life and who has given up his family relations, encourage the marriage ceremony? The Lord says here that any sacrifice which is meant for human welfare should never be given up. Vivaha Yajna, the marriage ceremony, is meant to regulate the human mind so that it may become peaceful for spiritual advancement. For most men, this Vivaha Yajna should be encouraged even by persons in the renounced order of life. Sannyasis should never associate with women, but that does not mean that one who is in the lower stages of life, a young man, should not accept a wife in the marriage ceremony. All prescribed sacrifices are meant for achieving the Supreme Lord. Therefore, in the lower stages, they should not be given up. Similarly, charity is for the purification of the heart. If charity is given to suitable persons, as described previously in the last chapter, it leads one to advance spiritual life. Now, Prabhupada doesn't mention it here, but this was a point of contention when Prabhupada came to America and he started preaching. He found, especially when he went to San Francisco, that, you know, good candidates for Krishna consciousness were coming with their girlfriends, you know. And so what was he supposed to do? You know, what he did was that he encouraged them to be married. And so then a fair number of them agreed. and then he performed the marriage, which is not done in India by the sannyasis. But he was the only one who could do it. And for the sake of preaching, for the sake of the movement, pushing on the movement, he broke that so-called regulation. And he got criticism from his godbrothers when they heard about it. But not here, but in other purports, he makes that point. Because, what is it he said? Sacrifice which is meant for human welfare should never be given up. So this sacrifice had to be performed, Otherwise, you would have lost the men, Oh, I can't be, have my girlfriend, then I'm not joining. So you can, get married properly. And those who were serious, they did that. And Prabhupada, it was a grand success historically. This movement, of course, it developed in America and Canada first. There was this. You may wonder why did he go up to Montreal? Because of the visa problem. Canada was part of the Indian British Commonwealth, as India was. You didn't need a visa there. Any other country in the Commonwealth, you could go freely. So he went there, and there was some people interested, and he started his center in Montreal. So, and that was important. Bhadraj came there, so many nice devotees. But the point is, Prabhupada was bending the rules a little bit in order for preaching. And so some of his first married couples, they performed the marriage ceremony with the fire sacrifice. It's become famous now in ISKCON, and named and tying the whole thing. And so who were those couples? There was, of course, Malati and Shyamasundar, Yamuna Devi and Gurudas, and Mukunda and Janaki. So they were sent. Prabhupada sent them. He called them to Montreal, and for a week or so he showed them so many things in Kirtan, trained them up, and then said, okay, you go to England and start the movement there. They had no idea what to do. They went, and they were hanging out here. They got, they were very together, charismatic, and they were chanting. And so gradually, of course, famously, they met Shyamasundar. He met George Harrison, and that was a huge boost for the whole movement. The Harekrishna movement became very famous, and eventually, Prabhupada came to the UK. They were able to stay at John Lennon's estate. There's a whole incredible story about it. So, because Prabhupada performed these marriages, and it was a grand success. So he showed that one should accept the yagyas, when it's favorable. Now dana and tapa, these are three things that involve a certain amount of self-abnegation. A sacrifice. You have to sacrifice your time. You have to sacrifice your money. And even the Sankirtan Yajna requires that you sacrifice some energy and you come together and do it. And of course, dana is charity. That also requires sacrifice of your money or hard-earned wealth. And tapa is by nature, difficult and some physically or mentally painful. But all of them can be used and are present in certain forms in Krishna consciousness, in the Krishna consciousness process that we've been given for the sake of purification. In other words, it's a great benefit because that purification opens up the whole world of advancement in Krishna consciousness, heading back to Godhead. So it should never be given up. That's if it is given up out of passion or ignorance, then that's faulty tyaga. It's tyaga that is just self-defeating. You can say, "Oh, I gave it up," but you didn't give it up. You just got lazy and went and took a big nap. That's not tyaga. Tyaga means something that you would ordinarily want to do, you don't do. You give it up because you know it's harmful. We have plenty of that. Okay. Similarly, charity is for the purification of the heart. So all of them are for purification. Text 6. Etanyapitu karmani sangam tyaktva palani cha kartavyani iti me parta nishtitam matamuttamam. All these activities, sacrifice, charity, and austerity, All these activities should be performed without attachment or any expectation of result. They should be performed as a matter of duty, O son of Pritha. That is my final opinion. Purport. Although all sacrifices are purifying, one should not expect any result by such performances. In other words, all sacrifices which are meant for material advancement in life should be given up. But sacrifices that purify one's existence and elevate one to the spiritual plane should not be stopped. This is exactly the lesson of King Parashara Barhishat. He was performing all these sacrifices to go to the heavenly planets, but he was getting himself more and more entangled in sinful activity. Everything that leads to Krishna consciousness must be encouraged. In the Srimad Bhagavatam also it is said that any activity which leads to devotional service to the Lord should be accepted. That is the highest criterion of religion. A devotee of the Lord should accept any kind of work, sacrifice, or charity which will help him in the discharge of devotional service to the Lord. So this brings up the other word that's so common, dharma. We have these three things: sacrifice, charity, and austerity and penance. And dharma. Dharma is really the overall structure in which these three take place. What do we perform in terms of tapasya? Well, there's all this, and this. It's part of Bhagavad Dharma. It's part of the Dharma that leads to devotional service, pure devotional service. The first question of the sages at Naimisharanya, asked Sutta Goswami, is what is that real dharma that can bring full satisfaction for the soul? It's not the dharma that leads to the heavenly planets. That's not satisfaction. That may be some material pleasure for some time, but then comes the anxiety. Oh my God, I've been here 100,000 years. My time is running down. Now what's going to happen to me? That's not superseded. So what does he say? Savai pangsang paro dharma yato bhaktir adhokshaje. That ahoitukya pariyata yatma superseded. That dharma which leads to bhakti, which is characterized as a hoituki. A hoituki is what he's describing here, without any material motivation. The word hetu means cause. In this context, it means material motive. That's why you think, well, how can you have unmotivated? How can you act if you're not unmotivated? The context, the lingo is that means without material motivation. Your motivation is to purify. Your motivation is to please the Guru and the sadhus and Krishna, and that's your impetus. The strongest motivation, even in the material world, is love. You think of all the sacrifices parents perform to, keep their children healthy and raise them nicely and feed them. A mother will even give up her life for the kid. The love is if my child can survive, that's okay. Happens all the time. That's sacrifice. But it's ultimately a material motivation. But that love, when directed toward Krishna and sadhus, remember the sadhu sangashtaka? That's the first instruction. Pasangam madaram bashamatmanakavayo vadu sahisha sadhashukato mokshadvaram apavatam. That same for sangha. There's sangha and there's prasanga. Pra is an intensifier, a prefix in Sanskrit. So sangha means attachment or affection, Prasanga means strong attachment. And here he's talking about material attachment. It's just like ajaram pasham, very strong ropes that tie us to this material world. Keep us coming back again and again and again. So that attachment has to be directed to Krishna, but we don't know Krishna. We can't see Krishna, so we have to direct it toward the sadhus. That's why we sing every morning. You see, Shri Guru Chadana Pade Ese Utamagati. Rati. Shri Guru Chadana Rati Ese Utamagati. Right? Rhymes. So Rati means attraction, love for the lotus feet of the Guru is the best means of advancement. Best means of advancement. Why? Because the person who you don't know Krishna, you can just study how this movement grew. Prabhupada came into people's lives, and he finally landed on 26th Avenue. He had his whole a nice place, his own apartment, and he was right in the smack dab in the middle of the revolution, the hippie revolution, which means it happened on many different levels. There was the drug element, the sex element, the rock and roll, but there was also a certain element of searching, interested in the East, in the Indian philosophy and all that was going on. There was a ferment going on. Perfect. And so a certain number came into Prabhupada's orbit, and by the chanting, by getting them to chant, it opened up the heart. Krishna from within the heart, he's making them, oh wow, what's this? This is quite an experience. And then they want to hear the Swami. What does it all mean? And pour out the philosophy. You can hear those early lectures. Prabhupada is so excited. He's speaking. Sometimes his voice is cracking. He's finally got an audience. And so, so that that's all. That's real sacrifice and parodharma. That's bringing about people's interest and turning their attraction from matter to Krishna. And that's what real purification means. So we're going to now hear, these yagya, dana, tapa, they can also be performed in the modes of nature. Everything can be, contaminated with the modes of nature. And we've seen even, it's just a fact of life. Over the years, devotees who allow themselves to deviate a little bit, from the strict sadhana and so forth, to commit offense, then they become prey to mayas and modes of nature. And their bhakti, although even externally it looks like the same thing's going on, internally there's a certain amount of passion, a certain amount of material desire creeping in. And so it's difficult to keep it going, month after month, year after year. But that's what it takes, because our mind is always with us, and if you allow it to deviate, it can become your worst enemy. So he's going to explain all these different sacrifices and different forms of charity and austerity in the modes of nature. And of course what we want is performing these on the transcendental platform. There's a place for all of them, and for purification. Okay. They should be performed without attachment, not material attachment or any expense. Do it as a matter of duty. So that matter of duty is accepted when one is under an authority that one trusts and has affection for. And that's why the guru is so important. Text 7. Making good progress here. Niyatasya tu sannyasa karmano nopapadyate mohatasya parityagas tamasak padikirtitaha. Prescribed duties should never be renounced. If one gives up his prescribed duties because of illusion, such renunciation is said to be in the mode of ignorance. Purport. Work for material satisfaction must be given up, but activities which promote one to spiritual activity, like cooking for the Supreme Lord and offering the food to the Lord and then accepting the food, are recommended. It is said that a person in the renounced order of life should not cook for himself. Cooking for oneself is prohibited, but cooking for the Supreme Lord is not prohibited. Similarly, a sannyasi may perform a marriage ceremony to help his disciple in the advancement of Krishna consciousness. If one renounces such activities, it is to be understood that he is acting in the mode of darkness. So there Prabhupada brings it in. This is revolutionary. It's never done before in the Gaudiya Vaishnava that they have a sannyasi and he does a marriage. But to help his disciple advance in Krishna consciousness, so Prabhupada performed that and broke new ground. Okay, going on. Dukkamityeva yat karma kaya klesha bhayatyajit sakritvaraja santyagam naivatyaga palang labed. Anyone who gives up prescribed duties as troublesome or out of fear of bodily discomfort is said to have renounced in the mode of passion. Such action never leads to the elevation of renunciation. Purport. One who is in Krishna consciousness should not give up earning money out of fear that he is performing fruitive activities. If by working one can engage the money in Krishna consciousness, or if by rising early in the morning one can advance in his transcendental Krishna consciousness, one should not desist out of fear or because such activities are considered troublesome. Such renunciation is in the mode of passion. The result of passionate work is always miserable. If a person renounces work in that spirit, he never gets the result of renunciation. Prabhupada is also here referring to the early days of the movement, when he had several devotees. How is the movement going to go on? You got to have some money coming in. They had rent to pay and boga to buy, and So he had several devotees who were working. Satsrup Maharaj was one of them, like the Stephen, and he got initiated, Satsrup. And also Rupanuga, I think, had a job. And then later on, of course, famously, Jayananda. He was fully initiated and everything. And, and he was driving a cab all day and paying, supporting the whole yatra, And, but then there's another episode of this where following, that mood, I think it was Tamal Krishna Das at that point, and several others, they got a job in some kind of factory doing film or chemicals, photographic chemicals, something like that. And they get it was so, debilitating that they said, all right, let's just go out and do Harinam and trust in Krishna. And they found they were able to sell enough BTGs to bring out back a little money, and in this way they struggled on. Till book distribution came in, and then that was a big, revolutionary thing. But I mean, there's so many stories like that. I remember Rabindra Sarup told me this story when I was in Philadelphia. I was in a class, he told the story in the class. And, it was tough in the early days. Money was tight. And so they just ran out of money. The money wasn't there for the rent, So they just went on Harinam, downtown Philadelphia, singing, and they're probably singing their hearts out, But whatever. So he notices on the other side of the street, there's this unusual looking figure, tall, dressed in a light suit, I don't know if he had shades on or not, and so he crosses the street, comes right in front of the party, hands Rabindra Sarup an envelope and keeps walking. And in that envelope is exactly the amount of money they need for the rent. And there's another one I heard fairly recently, where the same thing happens in San Francisco, and Maladi tells this story, and they're all out chanting on the street, and suddenly the $100 bills are coming down. And they pick them all up, and they're able to pay the rent. So they have these miracles, especially in the early days when things are... But, so that's, that's another level. But the point is that there are austerities to be performed, and why one does them and avoids giving them up is like a critical factor. You're doing them because it's your duty. The spiritual master asked you to do it. I'm going to do it. Somehow or other. And it's often a great austerity. I went out. I tried to distribute books. I did that for a while. It was never my sole service, but on Saturdays everyone would go out. And I never got over the hump, of like the false ego being beaten down and all these things. But I understood how austere it could be. When you hear these stories from the Sankirtan devotees, somehow no one was taking the book all day. I was approaching all these people. Sometimes they sit down, they cry, they chant some rounds, get back up, like that. It's actually a great austerity. This Vijay Prabhu is a great hero in this movement, living here. He's been doing this steadily since 1978. It's inconceivable. And, he tells it, it's difficult sometimes, But you can see how fired up he is, He's a wonderful devotee. So that's the kind of tapasya and yajna that is, what this movement is made of. Srila Prabhupada showed the way perfectly. That take it as a matter of duty, and then you find it becomes a passion. That's all you want to do. There's a story of this one devotee in Germany. He was having a health issue, and they didn't want him to go out. They put him in a room. They locked the windows. Somehow he got out and went out and distributed some books. He couldn't live without it. So that's what happens in Krishna conscious austerity. At a certain point, it turns into the most desirable thing that you want to do. It's not you're doing it out of duty. You're doing it out of transcendental, enthusiasm. So that doesn't happen with these other, yajna to go to heaven and everything. It's always troublesome, and you're always worried, oh my God, did I chant one syllable wrong, So we don't have to worry about that. All right. I think we're on text 9, right? Karyamityeva yat karma Niyatang kriyate arjuna sangam tyakva palam chaiva satyaga satviko mataha. O Arjuna, when one performs his prescribed duty only because it ought to be done, and renounces all material association and all attachment to the fruit, his renunciation is said to be in the mode of goodness. Purport. Prescribed duties must be performed with this mentality. One should act without attachment for the result. He should be disassociated from the modes of work. A man working in Krishna consciousness in a factory does not associate himself with the work of the factory, nor with the workers of the factory. He simply works for Krishna. And when he gives up the result for Krishna, he's acting transcendentally. He's talking about those people he sent out to get a job. And you notice the purports are quite short here. I always got the feeling that probably wanted to finish the book, you know. You look at the purports in the second chapter, they're really long, you know. And here they're quite short. There's some near the end where they get longer. But they're all, you know, nectar. Nadvesh akushalam karma kushale nanushajjate tyagi sattva samavishto medavi chinna sangshayaha. Oh, you're right. Medavi, I'm sorry. The intelligent renouncer, situated in the mode of goodness, neither hateful of inauspicious work nor attached to auspicious work, has no doubts about work. Purport. A person in Krishna consciousness or in the mode of goodness does not hate anyone or anything which troubles his body. He does work in the proper place and at the proper time without fearing the troublesome effects of his duty. Such a person situated in transcendence should be understood to be most intelligent and beyond all doubts in his activities. So this is, you know, one of the great things about Krishna consciousness is, as soon as you investigate a little bit, there's so many things to do, and so many things not to do. So this is like, okay, do I want to be serious? Let me start doing the things that, or I'll chant. You know, that's a big austerity, a big step. I'll start with so many rounds, you know, and chant. You know, but you know, to do it every day as a matter of, well, I don't know if I have time today. You know, I have to get them done. You know, accepting it as a duty. And things to give up, sometimes it's very difficult, you know, give up gambling. I mean, it's usually not that hard, but some people are totally into it. You know, I remember my little interaction with gambling when I was a kid. I was somehow I played poker with my friends, and then when I finally got a little money, I had a job. There was a racetrack in Long Island. It's still there, I'm sure. You know, it's not it's horses. But they ride these little chariots around, you know. And I would go there, you know, with my little $40 paycheck. I made like $1.35 an hour at that time, you know. And the guys who'd been there for a year, they were making $1.50 an hour. Right. I didn't stay there, obviously. But okay, let me go. And I would lose, you know. I remember, I'll never forget this, because, you know, knowing what I know now and how the modes of nature work, there was, you know, the mode of passion is there, people, and so the time for the gate is coming, you know, and people are lining up to place their bets, mostly $2 windows, you know. So right in the middle of this big crowd moving is this guy standing there, who doesn't seem to be moving toward one of the. He's just there, and his dirty clothes. He's standing there. He looked like he was about ready to fall over, and you know, today I would say, personification of the mode of ignorance, you know. I mean, and I'll never forget that. I said, Jesus, what am I doing here, you know? even though I didn't have even a hint of Krishna consciousness at that time. But anyway, I finally, one week I lost my whole paycheck, and that was it. That's it. I'm not going back. And I actually gave it up, you know. But some people are totally addicted to that. What to speak of drugs, you know, and so many things. It's a big thing to give those up. And you need to chant and pray very strongly oftentimes to get the strength to do it. So you can see the effectiveness of Krishna consciousness, you know. So that you know, it all takes it on a different view when it's done for that purpose of becoming qualified to really practice Krishna consciousness more, you know. That's the thing. All right, we'll do one more. Text 11. Nahi deha prata shakyam Tyaktum karman yasheshataha. Yastu karma palatyagi. Satyagi tyabidhiyate. It is indeed impossible for an embodied being to give up all activities. He said that earlier in the 3rd chapter. But he who renounces the fruits of action is called one who has truly renounced. Purport. It is said in the Bhagavad Gita that one can never give up work at any time. Therefore, he who works for Krishna and does not enjoy the fruit of results, who offers everything to Krishna, is actually a renouncer. There are many members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness who work very hard in their office or in the factory or some other place, and whatever they earn they give to the society. Such highly elevated souls are actually sannyasis and are situated in the renounced order of life. It is clearly outlined here how to renounce the fruits of work and for what purpose fruits should be renounced. So you see that you're coming back, it's the whole idea is the mentality that you're doing it in. That makes all the difference. The same activity can be done for a totally selfish purpose, or it can be done for a transcendental purpose. So from the externals, you can't always tell what's going on. But inside, you can feel the difference. You know, when you're actually working for Krishna, and, you know, at the end of the day, you don't have any material fruits, but you have a good feeling about yourself. And you've made advancement, you've purified some of the material desires in your heart. You know, there's all a question of cleansing the heart. And so that's how, you know, this movement is going on. Prabhupada was able to inspire people to actually perform this sacrifice, working for Krishna all day and chanting, you know, because of the mantra, because of your fruit is, what's the fruit? Is increased taste for chanting Hare Krishna. This is what Krishna gives us. And so, that's okay, quick, because we're almost done.
I was wondering, on one hand here it's saying that we don't have to give up all these worldly activities, just make them for Krishna, therefore they're just as good as, you know, they're transcendental. Yeah. But then at the same time we do respect renunciation, and we do regard that as even higher or even more advantageous than being in the Grihastha ashram sometimes. So it seems like...
Well, yeah. As I mentioned, Prabhupada is speaking, you know, inevitably according to what's going on in the movement. And this book was written in, like, you know, 68. And at that time, as I explained, there were devotees who needed to work in order to support the movement. There wasn't the whole book distribution thing, and it wasn't a big Indian community, you know, to help it. So he's encouraging them here. The problem is that, and this became the problem, in that environment, you're on some production line or something, you know, and the guy next to you is, you know, you can still smell his lunch, you know, he has a drink. It's just not an environment very hard to maintain your Krishna consciousness there. So, but the idea, you know, Jayananda was able to do it. You know, of course, driving a cab is another thing. You kind of control the environment one person at a time, you know. And he was able to maintain his enthusiasm, you know. But it's not ideal. And therefore, as soon as possible, of course, book distribution came in, but there were also businesses that devotees ran. The Spiritual Sky Incense, Govinda's restaurants are great, you know, where some grihasthas can work it and make it happen and support themselves and also support the movement. So that's even better when you can have an environment. But those who are, you know, in the emergency situation are willing to, you know, take on their own job and give most of their paycheck, then that's highly, you know, admirable. That's the idea. Yes, give that up and go out on book distribution. I mean, there's always like a way in which it, you know, it helps the movement. Or, you know, you become a full-time teacher in a gurukul. It's not at all, you know, something. In other words, when the movement grew, it developed a whole culture which could sustain itself, you know, materially as well as spiritually. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.